Hmm. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Selden, and this is Independent School Leaders Forum. This is sponsored by the Montessori Foundation, and I want to say that my co-host, Dr. Lindsay Pollack, the provost of Sarasota University, is not able to join us this week, and my friend Julie Taylor has agreed to serve as co-host, and she will monitor the chat and jump in if anyone chooses not to unmute and speak to me directly. And please, no, you can turn on your camera, you can unmute. It's okay. This is intended to be a forum, not a lecture. So it's fine to ask questions, to share an experience. And, the worst that happens is we don't get finished and we just have a third session because this is the second session because we were having a really interesting conversation a week ago. This week, we are talking about a new lens for strategic planning, or another way of saying it is a Montessori lens. Strategic planning is done by lots of organizations. Here's the basic premise. In a typical school or a typical nonprofit organization, strategic planning goes on. There's well-defined ways of doing it, typical ways of organizing the documents, and certainly there are best practices and lots of books out there that you can go to learn, lots of videos. It's not hard to learn how to do strategic planning. Here's my experience and why we're doing this. I have been involved with nonprofits as a board member, as a board president, as a head of school, working with other people's boards, a consultant for 50 some years now. I am reminded in most cases of the movie back from, I think, the 1930s called On the Waterfront, where if I remember correctly, it was William Bendix is saying, I don't know, what do you want to do, Marty? You want to build an infant toddler program or should we do a middle school? Yeah, we need an indoor pool. We need a gymnasium, an all-purpose room. We need new carpets. In other words, number one, if you don't really look at the school as a holistic entity, and ask yourself, okay, what are the top things that are on our minds? Because most organizations, when they start a strategic plan, they either look at the old one and they say, okay, so 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago, this is what we said was our strategic plan. And this is what we said we were going to do. This is when we said it would be accomplished, what it was going to cost, who was going to be responsible, and how we were going to evaluate our progress along the way. That's the theory of a strategic plan. On the other hand, many times, the plan that was done 5 years ago really didn't look at all the critical things that your school should have been looking at. For example, many schools are occupying a building that they inherited and is really not designed for a Montessori school. It's ugly, it's dark, it's dreary, it's way too small. The classrooms, your kids have to go down the hall to go to the bathroom. Any number of things may make that building different from your ideal. And my point is, number one, you don't want to just look at what you did before. In my opinion, you definitely want to look at your old strategic plan and say, okay, where were we 5 years ago? But you want to look fresh and you want to ask yourself, if money was no object, what are all the things about our school that we think could be better in all of the 9 areas of a school? Now, I want to remind you what those 9 areas are, and there will be a test. The first is the educational program. That includes before school, after school, summer camp, lunch program, phys ed program, art, anything at all having to do with what children experience from the youngest child in your school to the oldest child in your school. What I'm describing has nothing to do with whether you're Montessori or a monastery, whether you're a Jewish day school, a prep school, a Quaker school, public school. Every school has the same 9 areas. Every school is unique. One of the things we always tell Montessori schools is don't sell Montessori, sell your unique school. Montessori is not a commodity any more than being a Quaker school is, a Jewish day. You are unique. That you may be the only one in town, which makes it easier. However, Marketing and continuous improvement is all about asking, what do we stand for? What are we trying to do? What kind of kid are we trying to graduate? What kind of teacher do we want to attract? What kind of relationship do we want to have with our employees? In other words, in all 9 areas, you want to keep asking, what are we trying to accomplish here? If you don't know where you're trying to get to, the odds that you'll ever get there are pretty minimal. So there are 9 areas. The first is the educational program. The second is the faculty and staff that actually make that program real. So where do they come from? What's their training? What do you pay them? How do you recruit them? How do you keep them? Do you have a lot of turnover? Are your people doing what you want them to do, or are they basically passively resisting? For example, I just spoke to someone who's running a Montessori school who said, I have 8 classrooms. I'm trying to implement transparent classroom. And of my 8 teachers, only 3 are actually doing it. That is not okay. Now, that doesn't mean that just because it's not okay, she could do much about it, because you got to get people to voluntarily cooperate, because if they don't cooperate, there are all kinds of ways they can screw it up. But it's not okay, because if parents have a kid in 2 rooms and they see in one room, this is what happens, in another room, you get something different, people start to distrust your entire school. This kind of thing, your school needs to be coherent, consistent in every aspect that's important. Now, not everything's important. You may have a teacher from France who's fluent in French and she's teaching her kids French, and you're certainly not going to tell her you can't teach French. Or you got someone who's a ballerina and she's teaching her kids basic ballet. Cool. You're not going to tell her she can't do it unless she's not doing her core job. So it's not that our teachers have to be clones of one another. However, everything that you think is important, like we don't take our kids out to recess at 10:30 in the morning, we want a 3-hour work period, that is not negotiable. What a classroom looks like, what kind of materials do we expect in a 3 to 6 classroom? Do we actually expect our teachers to use cursive as opposed to print or Denalian? Your answer may not be the same as in other schools, but within your school, there better be an answer. So again, going back to strategic planning, there are 9 areas, and in my opinion, you want to look at all 9 areas. We've just named 2. The educational program, how good could it get if money wasn't a problem and all your teachers were on board? Your faculty and staff, what kind of teachers would we recruit if we could just wave a magic wand and bring all the perfect people in here? Money, finances, what kind of money does it take to make all this happen? Facilities, what kind of facilities do we really want if we had the ideal campus and the ideal grounds, the ideal buildings, and any number of things could be true. Cathedral windows or doors going right outdoors to the garden, 14 acres of land, more than enough parking. I don't know, whatever it is you want. If money was no object, what would you do? Then there's the issue of your administrative team. Most people running schools are feeling like they're running on a treadmill. What would it take to feel like you've got it all under control, that you're not desperately trying to make it all happen, building bricks without straw? I'm not sure if anyone builds bricks with straw anymore, but whatever. Is your administrative team really able to do the right things? Are you finding you have to spend your Saturday and Sunday doing schoolwork? How smoothly is your admin team working? Are you trusted by your board, or do they think you just don't know enough? You're not business minded enough? Are you trusted by your teachers? Do they feel like you've got their backs, that you are listening to them? In other words, how well is the admin team working to accomplish the mission of the school? Same thing with the ownership or the board. Is that board making you crazy, or is that board really great and saying, what else can we do to help you? Then there's marketing. If you are bleeding off kindergartners, even if every single year you hit your enrollment numbers, it's not working right. You need to get the right kids in, and you need to keep them there until you want them to go away. And again, a lot of schools just kind of assume there's nothing I can do to change it. That's just the way it is. Ain't it awful? I'm sorry, that's not true. I have a saying that is very irreverent. We've been dating all the wrong people. We've been letting people into our school who would love us if we were different. And so strategic planning and marketing is a little bit important, I think. So to have a strategic plan that doesn't look at how well is our marketing plan working and not look at that is a real absence. It's not the only thing, it's an important thing. Then there's a whole issue of, are we meeting our financial goals? Are people paying their bills? How much financial aid are we having to give? Are we able to give the aid that we want? If there's some state financial aid program that we're involved in, is it causing us to have to change our fundamental program to make the state happy? Is the juice worth the squeeze? These are strategic questions. Then there's the keeping of families, the building of community. If you've got a 10% attrition a year, and a lot of schools that I know are losing 33% or more of all their children every single year, you've got a leak in the boat that's really serious. Now, it may be that that's the way it's been since the beginning of time, but you need to know it doesn't have to be that way, which doesn't mean you can instantly change it. But strategic planning looks at the whole institution. And then the last thing is capital. I don't care where capital comes from. If the roof burns off or gets blown off by a hurricane, you may not have enough money in the budget or in the bank to pay for it. If you want to add a gym, you may not be able to take that out of tuition next year. So you need capital, whether it's a bank loan, an SBA loan, whether you know about SEMBL, which is a very interesting organization for those of you that are nonprofits, whether you do private bonds, whether you do capital fundraising, or some combination thereof, you've got to have a way of gathering the capital that you need to do the things that you know are going to eventually come along. If you don't, then what happens is 50 years goes by in the blink of an eye, and you're still sitting in the same cruddy old facilities you were in year one. So having a plan for all of those areas is part of it. And the last part is what makes it Montessori. Why do I say strategic planning through a new lens, through a Montessori lens? And that's really what today is all about. In addition to the bricks and mortar of how do we do this process, what makes it Montessori is we don't get the board in a room by itself, or we get the owner of the school or the head of the school and a couple of key staff members, and they do the strategic plan. Or we don't go through a whole rigmarole and have it be a beautiful document and it sits around on a shelf gathering dust. All of those are irrelevant, and we don't want that. What we want is a dynamic strategic plan that is easily accessible to anybody, where people feel like they were really heard. And by the way, I was talking to a school yesterday that said, oh, well, we get everyone involved. We do a survey. We give them the opportunity to give us their input. Well, I'm sorry. People that are professional pollsters know that most people don't answer polls because they're too darn busy and they don't care. And they usually, if they do them, it's got to be multiple choice. Are you here for this, that, or the other? Because they don't want to spend a lot of time. On the other hand, if you get them in a conversation, which is what the foundation does for almost everything we do. If we gather all your families that are willing to show up together, and admittedly, not everyone will show up, and we start saying, what led you to this school? Tell me what would make it better. What do your kids think? In fact, especially if the kids are in the room with you, which, by the way, makes it Montessori, because the kids are the owners of the house, right? So the bottom line is the Montessori approach is a way of doing really rigorous strategic planning that may look sloppy or take more time compared to what a Fortune 500 corporation would do, but is more likely to lead to deep thinking, creative solutions, and serious buy-in, which is really the goal. There is a saying that is attributed to Amazon that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so the whole idea is what we believe at the Montessori Foundation and what we think you probably believe as Montessori leaders, is that the best way of doing strategic planning is one that is not the same as what everyone else tells you to do and is involving as many players as possible without making them crazy and without making you crazy. So having said that, let me just stop, and I've been talking at you for a while. Let me see if anyone's got anything that you want to chip in or ask or say. Feel free to turn on your camera and show us pretty faces and talk to us. Julie, any thoughts from you?
This is actually my second week as head of school here. So I am learning as I go.
There you go. Tell me again what school you're with, Julie.
I'm at Cedar Valley Montessori School in Cedar Rapids.
Oh, Cedar Martha's school.
Yeah,
Am I
Marcia.
Marcia?
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Well, wonderful. If there's ever anything the foundation can do, just call.
Thank you. Absolutely. I was at another Montessori school, but as assistant head of school. So this is my first in charge gig.
Well, the only advice I can give you is don't see yourself as a caretaker. Don't see yourself as a masseuse. I'm here to make you feel better. Recognize your teachers probably are about to collapse. That's perfectly normal. It's not new. It's been that way as from what I could tell. Back in the 1920s, people were doing that. And some will and some won't. On the other hand, what we are is in my opinion, we are a rabbi, an inspiring spiritual leader. We are an articulator of a vision, which, would certainly be ideally a vision that's compatible with the school's history. But don't hesitate just because you're new to,
Very
to
well.
talk the good talk. And you're the rainmaker. So your job is to go out and bring the right families in, even if you've got an admission team, and make a community out of the people that are there. So a lot of glad handing and cocktail drinking, whatever you got to do, and the idea of going out and recruiting the right staff. Hi, Lisa Reiner. How are you? Are you just joining us, or are
Good.
you just?
Now I've been here. I wasn't paying attention to my feed not being on.
Lisa, you want to jump in too?
Sure.
Say hi to Julie. It's just taking over
Hi,
Cedar
Julie.
Rapids.
That's exciting. Congratulations. We're in Maryland. We have a Montessori school in Maryland, and we start at 2 and go through 12 years right now.
Oh, that's awesome. We're just primary. So
It's
maybe
a
one
lot of
day.
fun. We went older and then we added younger, and it's a lot of fun.
I would
No,
really like
no.
to see us develop a NITO program here, but I'm not so sure the board is on board with that yet. I believe so strongly, Tim, in what you were saying about community. I mean, I think that if you can build a community of like-minded people,
Yes.
that's like the most important thing that I'm going to aspire to that. Bringing in like-minded families, like-minded guides.
Mhm.
Well,
It makes a world of difference.
the other thing is you were just saying, Julie, that, not sure the board's on board for that. So getting the board to a place where their minds are open, they're willing to be brave. They're not thinking like parents. They're thinking about the big picture of the school. Well, there is no wrong answer. I mean, you can add a NITO, you can not add NITO, you can add on elementary, middle school, whatever you want to do. But ideally what you want is a board that is not sitting on their hands and showing up at a board meeting and looking at their phones and sort of saying, "Well, what else have you done for me lately, Julie?"
Right.
Lisa, you turned on your camera. Any thoughts about this thing I was talking about with strategic planning?
It's vital. I mean, the first thing I did when you were talking, well, I started taking notes, and then I print it because this is on my desktop. So I printed it out again to be ready to take more notes. But that culture eat strategy for breakfast and the importance of culture was never more evident. This is our 25th year. We'll be going into our 26th year in the fall. And it was never more evident than that COVID year. And, when COVID hit, and then getting through the year of all of the volatility and all of the changes and all of the uncomfortable situations and not requirements, but the big asks. I mean, that having that culture already established made all the difference in the world. And I heard that, I could hear that from other school leaders and appreciated what we had, but I also got to see it where it juxtaposed. For a while, my kids' school was on a parallel track to us. And then as we got further into COVID, they started to waver and go off the path. And it really created some instability within the families at that school that seemed easily avoidable. So that culture piece, I should never be underestimated. And I agree with Tim. The vision, your vision and your commitment, and what's the other word I wanted to use? And your excitement to add or to grow. I think anytime that comes through, granted, I don't have a board, so take it with a grain of salt. But I do think those passions and that vision coming through to the board makes a huge difference in adding levels and improving the program. I think when we get excited, it's palpable. I think our energy is palpable. Actually, I know our energy is palpable. It is to the kids and it is to the adults. And it may not all adults really seem to be impacted by somebody's energy, whether they can feel it or not, but most of them are. And I think that is a really important thing to monitor.
Great. Anyone else want to open your camera up and talk to us? We're delighted to hear from you. And if you prefer to put in the chat, Julie is monitoring. Well, I'm not hearing anyone else jumping in. Please know you can jump in anytime. It's just fine. So I guess what I should start doing is share, and I'll just go back through the early part of what we said. I hope what I was talking about without slides makes sense. I mean, to me, that just covered everything in the slideshow. However, there are specific point-by-point things that people often want to know about. How do I do a strategic plan? And how do I look at all of this? I mean, to me, again, if you go through the 9 areas, ideally you start with what we call a blueprint or some kind of document that talks about what is our school really all about? What are our core values? How do we treat people? What kind of children are we trying to raise? What's important? What makes us unique? For example, I'm working with a school down in Southern Maryland, and I'm helping them to think about what already makes them unique, which is a lot of good stuff. They've got 13 acres. Um, this is Bay Montessori, Lisa. I'm sure you know. They got 13 acres. They go through middle school, a lot of really nice things. But, their goal is to expand and to build up still more enrollment and to get everything in order so that they'll go for another 50 years. So one of the things I started to say is, okay, so let's think about things you could do. One, with 13 acres, you're already doing some gardening. You could get serious about gardening and teach every kid serious gardening and food preservation, food drying, canning, jarring, making apple pies, whatever you want to do. You could start an orchard on the property and start raising your own apples. You go out to local orchards. You're in Southern Maryland, Chesapeake Bay. They're less than a half mile from the water. They could teach kids the history of Southern Maryland. They could teach, the ecology, the geography of Southern Maryland, the life cycle of the bay, obviously studying the oysters and the crabs and the birds that we have down here, learning traditional, crops like, the growing of watermelons and cantaloupes and corn, which is so traditional from Maryland, studying the Canadian geese, which most people associate with the Chesapeake Bay, and that come down here every fall and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And then there's a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, Maryland's favorite dog. Anyway, there's so many things you could do studying indigenous people, and you could do that. I mean, the average teacher does some of that, but a school could actually say, you know what? We're going to make that be part of who we are. And it may not be the only thing we do, but we want to do that as one theme that runs throughout our school. We want to be known for that. And it doesn't have to be one theme. It could be the arts, it could be music, it could be gardening, it could be nature, it could be wilderness, it could be boating. Um, the Barry School, for example, has 50 canoes. It was traditionally known for hiking and Appalachian Trail backpacking and horseback riding and gardening and all kinds of things. There's no one way to do this. And the trick is what makes our school unique? Where strategic planning comes in is we can't do everything. If you have 100 strategic plans, it all becomes just sort of noise. You gotta figure out what's really important, which doesn't mean that the other things aren't important too, and it doesn't mean that they have to wait 5 years before we touch them. It's just they may not be strategic. They may be tactical plans. And there's a real difference between a strategic initiative, something that you see as really important, as opposed to a 1 year goal, a 2 year goal, something, we're adapting transparent classroom in our school this year, or we're putting in Illumine, or we're going to go from Denilian to cursive. Those are tactical plans, not strategic plans. So again, ideally, whatever we do, we organize it in such a way that most people have a pretty good idea of what we're up to, why we're doing it, and how it affects them, and what do we need from them. And by the way, that whole issue of what do you need from me is, in my opinion, really important, because most Montessori schools are moaning these days, I can't get my parents to come out at night. Or I run an annual campaign and no one wants to give. Or no one reads my emails. Now, people aren't bad. They got their own lives. On the other hand, it's like dog training. If you want the dog to do what you want, you have to understand how dog training works. You have to be consistent. And so the whole idea is figure out what's important for your school. And one of the things we recommend is understand that as a school.
I thought I did.
Sorry, Lisa?
I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button.
No worry. As a school, we have the right to ask things of parents. In fact, if we don't ask things of parents, we're probably going to be taken for granted. That is not what you want. You are a school of choice. I don't care if you're publicly funded or not. The odds are that people who are choosing your school are going out of their way to send their kids to your school. They're probably paying tuition. They got a mother-in-law who wants to know, why are you sending my grandchild to that weird school? What's wrong with the Catholic school, or what's wrong with the public kindergarten? And so whatever it is, what is it you want to ask of them should be a part of your overall culture and your overall ethos. Okay. Before I get started with the slideshow, anyone got anything else they want to ask or say? No? Okay. Somewhere's in here, I've got a PowerPoint. Here it is. All right. We get the floating meeting controls out of the way. We go to the slideshow and have it play from the start. And again, if you were here last week, this will be familiar. All of you are going to get a copy of this slideshow if you didn't already get one last week, but we will send it again along with an article. So, strategic planning through a different lens, a Montessori-inspired framework. That's what we've been talking about. So, most of the strategic planning processes that I see produce documents. They don't actually change the school very much. In the traditional plan, you end up with a pretty document, a binder, but when you do it the Montessori way, you actually get shared understanding, you get buy-in, you get compliance with traditional planning. In other words, if you're serious, If you're, let's say, a Fortune 500 company and the company board says, these are our goals for the next 5 years, either you get with a program or you get fired, or you don't get promoted. So there's compliance as opposed to buy-in and clarity. And we really value clarity, and we definitely value choice. With traditional planning, you get initiatives. In other words, it sounds good. Like think of Joseph Stalin's 5-year plans. He was doing a lot of strategic planning. Whereas in the Montessori approach, we get alignment, the idea of people working together. And in traditional planning, you do get a process. It looks good on paper, but in the meaningful planning process, I would have to say we do get a process because there is a plan, but we also get community ownership. And the question that I ask on this slide is how many of the strategic plans you've ever seen actually shape the daily decisions of that organization 3 years later? And the answer may be, oh, a lot of them. But a lot of them that I've seen, people don't even know that it was ever done. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. The idea of that is that execution, pulling a strategic plan into reality, requires that people buy in. Strategy determines the what and the where, but culture dictates the how. If your staff is unmotivated or if they're resistant, which we see a lot in Montessori schools, my trainer didn't say to do it that way. I was taught this way in my training center. If your staff is resistant, very little is going to change. So the best approach, in my opinion, is to design a strategy that aligns with your school's existing culture, or, and this is a key, this is what I was saying to you, Julie, don't sit there and just assume you're there to cheer them on no matter what they're doing, because they may not know what they're doing. So intentionally, you can shape the culture to support the school's strategic goals. And that idea of the inspiring leader, like a really, really good president who inspires people to do good things and to love one another and to believe in a better world, that's kind of what we're looking for in a Montessori school leader. So the typical strategic planning process, it may look tidy, but the result of what happens after that big retreat is usually forgotten and forgettable. So what is strategic planning really for? I would argue it is part of an ongoing process of a school or an organization thinking about who are we, where are we, what are we doing really well, what do we need to improve on, what are our goals. For example, back around 5 years ago, InCorp magazine did, the best company to work for in America. That's something they do every year. Of all the companies you could have seen that they would choose, they chose the Container Company. Why? Because the Container Company did something really brilliant. It got all of its people that worked at each of the local outlets where they had a shop in the mall. And it said to the people, if you want, come back after your shift and join us on our nickel. We'll pay you for it. But join us for a once a week meeting where we go over how did we do as a store? What would we like to do? And what are your thoughts about what can make it better? And they found that doing this got more buy-in from the employees, whether they were stock workers in the back storeroom or front office people, managers. People really liked the idea that they knew what was happening. They could see the week after week indicators of progress, and they felt like someone cared about them, who was actually asking them, what do you think? What do you think we could do? Mission clarification is one of the real goals of strategic planning, long-term alignment, and disciplined approaches to making decisions. So the idea is that you start off with who are you, what's your mission, your identity? What are our values, which is another part of your identity? What are our priorities? Now we're into issues of strategic thinking. Then our decisions and our actions. In other words, one leads to the next, leads to the next. And so there's a real logic of how we do things as a company. So why does Montessori philosophy matter here? Whether you're a Waldorf school, a Quaker school, a public traditional school, doesn't matter. Montessori philosophy is relevant to you, I would argue. One, we believe in observing the situation, put our finger on the pulse and trying to figure out what's really going on before we come up with a plan. That concept of wanting to know the truth of what's really happening, of trying to get to the bottom of things, is part and parcel of the medical model that is Montessori. Again, physicians that are any good don't go in and assume that what the patient needs is a particular treatment. What they do is they go in and they run a series of tests, they do an evaluation, they try to get a sense of what's going on with this person, and that leads them to intuit, I think maybe it could be this, I think maybe you would benefit from that. It doesn't mean that observation leads to a consistently correct answer. It's just how could you possibly do something without observing first? The second is don't impose strategy before you understand what is really going on. So again, with a new head of school, the first step is listen, ask questions, observe, and try to figure out what the truth is here. And in the same time, while this is happening, I think it's perfectly fine to be articulating a vision of this is why I'm a Montessorian, this is why I'm here at this school, this is what I really appreciate about what I see here so far, or these are things that I can already see that I sense would be incredibly valuable to this school. Do you agree with me? Or if you disagree, let's talk. So we think about things from a systems design. I already spoke about this, the idea of looking at the school holistically. That's the 9 areas we spoke about. The idea of collaborative dynamics, of not just doing this in a back room with the board, but getting as many people involved as possible and going way beyond sending out a survey instrument that they fill out. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing a survey. It's just that that's usually a very crude way of getting input from people. And then you want to create feedback loops. The idea there is you don't just do it once every 5 years. You create a regular way of checking in with people of what's working and what's not working. And that leads you to a better and better understanding of where are we? What's working here? What do we need to be paying attention to? So again, we want our plan to be aligned to our mission, to our core values, the strategic objectives that we do come up with, and we want to have community engagement. And we want to have a child-centered design because that's basically it. We are not running this school for the convenience of the teachers. We're not running it for the convenience of the parents. It doesn't mean we don't care about the teachers. It doesn't mean we don't care about the parents. It's that our first mission is make sure the kids are okay. So we plan it to support them as human beings. And we want to have a long-term perspective. The way I always think of it is a strategic plan is like headlights on your car on a dark country road where there are no lights. What you're trying to do is light up the pathway in front of you from 2 feet in front of your bumper to the furthest point where your light is pushing out, because you're looking to see Bambi, or Bambi's mother, who's about to cross in front of you. And you're also trying to look at the little chipmunk or the tortoise who's in the road that you're about to run over. So again, the goal is everything between here and there. Now, normally the extent of this is 5 years. Most companies think that 5 years is about the right plan time frame for a strategic plan. I don't disagree with it, except from my experience, 5 years is a long time. So I think that there's nothing wrong with having a general sense of where we want to be in 5 years, but I also want to be reevaluating where we are and coming up with new strategic plans if necessary every year. So to me, this is not a once every 5 year process. This is continuous improvement, continuous self-study. So we want to create, again, in our school, a prepared environment for learning. And that includes the way the grounds are, the classrooms are, the hallway is, the physical space, the way it looks. And most schools are ugly. And ideally, your school should speak timeless beauty. I don't care if it's big or small, rich or poor, there are ways of creating beauty. We want our prepared environment for learning to be emotionally incredibly safe, incredibly supportive, because social emotional learning is a huge part of what we're doing as educators. Want to work hard to get a community that is truly engaged, not the parent who doesn't show up for parent ed, although the average parent would rather watch paint dry than come out at night to listen to you talk. So the trick is to figure out what does it take to get these parents into some kind of partnership with our school. It's really important that your relationship with families, in my opinion, and this is true whether you're Montessori or not, that your relationship with your parents is not transactional. It's not they pay money and in return for their tuition, you do this. It's not about what have you done for me lately. It's what are we doing together and what do you need from me to help? That kind of partnership buy-in is absolutely vital. It starts with making people feel seen, making people feel heard. And strategic planning is a great way to do that. It also means you really have to have inclusive communication. The typical board is very reluctant to communicate to people until it's got its ducks in order. Unless every single thing is correct, they will not communicate. I think that is seriously wrong. I think it's important for parents to see how the sausage is made, that they understand that we're in a conversation. We don't know yet. Let's talk. Let's talk. Tell me more. What do you think? The idea of we're doing this together. That doesn't mean your school's a democracy, in my opinion. Maybe it is, but generally it's not. It does mean that every voice matters. That's not the same as democracy. So the idea of caring about what your people are thinking, feeling, wishing, doesn't mean you can always give them what they want, but if you don't ask, you're not going to hear. Now, so we want to have some kind of organizational learning and action, which again, the whole idea of this is to create a plan that will lead your school to growth, which doesn't necessarily mean more kids. It could mean a budget that has more safety margin built into it. It could mean you're building up reserves in the bank. It could mean that you are improving the quality of your teachers or getting more teachers trained because they're not all certified, or you've got more depth in the bench in case a teacher leaves you suddenly and now you don't have anyone who's trained in reserve. Whatever it is, you're trying to figure out what do we need here. Again, you're also trying to create a culture of collaboration. And as a leader, when you start the strategic planning process, you want to have a real process of being flexible, collaborating, and having vision. And you want stewardship. I think at this point, I'm going to stop with the slideshow, and I'm going to talk to you about the practical issues of what I would do to organize my strategic planning process, whether I got a big school or a little school. If I had a little school, if I had under 100 kids, anything under 200 kids is a little school. Again, there are degrees of little. What I would do is I would call people together and do what some people in architecture call charretting. I would gather people together. I would record the meeting. I'd let people know I'm recording it. I could take really careful notes. I could do video, whatever you want to do. But what I would do is I'd say, okay, so we want to make a plan for the next 5 years. When you think of our school, here are the 9 areas of the school. There's a chart, by the way, that I can give you that shows the 9 areas of a school. And I'd say, when you think about Aardvark Montessori School, what would make it better in the area of the educational program? Is there something you really wish we did differently or that we did that we're not currently doing? A sports program, Montessori Model UN, Saturday school, summer camp, a middle school. You tell me, what is it you wish? Your teachers have opinion. Your parents have opinion. Your children probably have opinion. And I believe in doing everything I can to get those people to talk. Now, I may have to do different meetings. Like with the kids, they may not want to sit there in a room with their parents. You may have to go, Julie, into a room with a bunch of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds and say, our school is getting ready to look ahead to its future. I want to ask you folks some questions. I want you to tell me as best you can what you think, because I really care about what you think. I can't promise we can do everything that you propose, but I can tell you we care what you think. What would make this school better? And I want to ask you, what would make it better on the playground? What would make it better in terms of our classroom building? What would make your classroom look better? You wish you had a kitchen in here. You wish you had a greenhouse in here. You wish you had a pony in here. Okay, tell me more. Tell me more. Do you wish that we taught you a second language? Do you wish that you could learn Italian? What do you wish? So, bottom line is you can do the same thing with parents, the same thing with your teachers. So, the more people you get involved, the better. So, again, we go through all 9 areas and we may or may not come up with something. They may say, nothing particular needed for capital. I mean, there's no major project that we've got in the wing. I think we're okay there. And our finance, I mean, we're doing all right financially. I don't think we have to do anything major there. We just need to keep adjusting for inflation. Okay, well, inflation's 4% right now. So we guide people through it, and what they start to do is popcorn out. Now, again, if you have an old strategic plan, you start off with that. Here's the old strategic plan. Let's think about, did we do it? Have we accomplished it? If not, is it still important? Maybe it's not important to us at all. So we start coming up with issues like we really need a swimming pool. It's hot as all heck here in the summertime in Indiana. We really need a swimming pool, or we really need an indoor pool, or we really need an ice skating rink, or we really need an all-purpose room. It's during mud season, it's miserable. Whatever it is. So you start popcorning ideas. Then you go back and you start saying, of these, which ones seem to be the most important, the ones you most care about? Because again, they can't all be equally important. Which ones would be the most difficult to do that can't be simply done by having the board say, we approve doing this tomorrow? So, I mean, if money would fix it, it isn't a problem. All you need to do is write a check. On the other hand, a lot of stuff takes time. Like if you've got 3 teachers out of 8 who aren't Montessori trained, and you want all 8 teachers to be Montessori trained, it's at least a 1-year process. And then you got to see if the teachers are willing to do it. And then someone's got to pay for it. And then what training program are they going to go to? So it's going to take time to turn that strategic decision into a reality. Lots of other things would be like that. So we identify what are the things we want. Second, the strategic goal has to be specific. It can't be vague. We want to improve enrollment. Sorry, that doesn't cut it. We want to increase enrollment from 50 children to 150 children over the next 5 years. That's a measurable goal. Whether it's realistic is a different issue, but it's a measurable goal. It has to be very, very specific. The next thing is, does that goal have subcomponents, things that need to be done to make that be so? Most of the things we do in strategic planning actually have several building block things or tasks that have to be done. So the way you do it typically is you have the big goal, and the big goal could be pretty vague. I want to improve enrollment here at the school. Okay, well, what's your first specific example? We want to increase in year one, we want to increase enrollment by 10% over what we have now. Or to do that, we're going to hire a marketing director, an admissions director. We're going to begin doing Google and Facebook ads. See, my wife has just shown up with a smoothie king, which I'll gladly accept. So again, get specific. Remember, in doing this, think about all 9 areas of the school just to make sure you didn't forget something, and get specific. And then with each individual goal, ask yourself, okay, what specifically needs to be done? How would we measure it? What's it going to cost? Because we have to usually allow money in the budget for this. Who's going to do it? And how are we going to track progress? So that concept is really important. Now, the way I usually draw these documents up may be something like, it can be done any way you want, but often it's done on graph paper. And we show, this is what the goal is, this is who's going to do it, this is what it's going to cost, this is the benchmarks that we're going to work on. In year one, this is what we want to see. In year two, this is what we want to see. So you lay it out as carefully as you can. How will we know that we are getting from here to there? So ideally, you're drawing up a document. Everyone knows what you're doing. Everyone feels like they've had an opportunity to have input into it. Everyone understands what is their role in it, if there is a role for them. We're very clear about who's going to do what. And we're going to come back and we're going to measure our progress towards this on some basis. It could be every month, which probably is overkill, but it could be. For example, if you're doing enrollment as a strategic goal and you're meeting as a board every month, you'd probably do a monthly report of where are we. And you'd always say, this is what our goal is. This is where we are as we work towards that goal. So again, what is it? What's it going to cost? When will it be done? How will we know that it was accomplished? Who's doing it? And you have a document that shows each one of the strategic goals or strategic elements in it. Now, you can create the fanciest document you want. The bottom line is it has to be something that people understand, they can remember. Any document that you just do and people forget you ever did it is pretty worthless. So our goal is do it well. And that's about it. Let me stop and see if anyone, whether Lisa or you, Julie, or anyone else, do you have any comments or questions that you want to throw in here?
I really appreciate that you have kind of reaffirmed for me what my first thoughts were in joining this school, which is that I need to meet as many parents as I can and give them as many opportunities as I can to know me, to talk to me about what's important to them. So I feel like I'm at least on the right path.
Julie, if you're not familiar with our work, if you don't know about the monthly community meeting process, you may want to go to YouTube, because on YouTube, if you go Montessori Foundation, you'll see all the past things we've done. If you go to the Montessori.org, you'll see articles, 30 some years of them. But why the Montessori Foundation exists is we are a private school consulting group specializing in Montessori. We represent 100-year legacy as a family. And we have very specific things we recommend and challenge Montessori schools to do that some people get really excited about because it's not what you hear from the typical Montessori organization. If we can ever help, that's what we're here for. We do professional development, we do board retreats, we do strategic planning, we do fundraising, you name it, anything at all,
Excellent.
marketing. And of course, we have the Montessori Family Alliance. If you don't know what that is, go to montessori.org and look it up. Hi, Sheila Griffin.